Hi everyone, how are you doing today? I'm going to be talking about something called autofiction, which is a genre of literature that I have gotten into in the last few years. I'm going to be going over some examples of autofiction I've read, but first let's start with a definition. What is autofiction? And I'm going to be referring to that most eminent of authorities, Wikipedia here. Wikipedia says autofiction is, in literary criticism, a form of fictionalized autobiography. An author may decide to recount their life in third person, to modify significant details and characters, use invented subplots, and imagined scenarios with real-life characters in the service of a search for self. And it goes on. But basically, you can think of autofiction as a book that's told a bit in the style of an autobiography or memoir, but knowing that the author is inserting some fiction along the way, and you may or may not know what that is. It sounds like that this term came about in the latter half of the 20th century. Various books have been categorized as autofiction since then, but I would actually argue that you can find examples of this in classic literature as well. I'm not really going to go into that here in depth, but the one that did kind of jump to mind is I think some of the works of Joseph Conrad I think would fall under the category of autofiction. Granted, we don't know exactly to what extent Conrad and Marlowe are alike and to what extent they're different. That's a subject of great debate, but there's no doubt that large parts of Conrad's life at sea influenced his writing and writings about the seas, and some of his experiences in working in the Congo influenced his books like Heart of Darkness and so on. And the way he tells his stories is very much that first person recounting something from their lifestyle. Again, might be stretching the genre definition here a bit, but I think you can find a little bit of that in Conrad. But going to more clear-cut examples of autofiction. So I've read a few, and I don't have all of them here represented. I think the first one that really got me into this was Rings of Saturn by W.G. Sebald. This was something that a friend and I read for our Reading the World challenge. Sebald is, I believe, from Germany or Austria. And basically, well, it was written in German, but basically it follows this narrator on a walking tour in England. And there's a lot of encyclopedic knowledge in this book that the narrator recounts as he's going along, looking at ruins and, talking about various things he knows. So it feels very, very non-fictional, but there's little gotchas in here that make you wonder sometimes how much of it is fiction and non-fiction. A very distinct book, I would say. There's something about this book that just really is unlike anything I've read before, and I've done a whole review on this. I'll link to it in the description, but Sebald is one of the more prominent writers in this autofiction category, so definitely give him a try if you're interested in this at all. I've read two recent works of autofiction, and these are both published by Fitzcarraldo Editions, which they tend to publish more lesser-known contemporary literature. And I really enjoyed both of these. Well, I enjoyed this one. This one I had kind of mixed feelings about, actually, but I did enjoy Pond quite a bit. Pond by Claire-Louise Bennett. This follows a woman who lives in a cottage, and though it takes place in the modern day, she writes in this very quaint style, very quaint, self-conscious and charming. She's some kind of academic. She sounds very much like an English teacher, not in a bad way. And she just, you know, that whole meme, like romanticize your life, I think she kind of does that, but she's not a romantic character, I would say. She's very, I think if she has one distinctive trait, it's that she's very introspective, overanalyzes things maybe, and just kind of, it's hard to describe the narrator succinctly, but I find her to be quite interesting, and I most enjoyed the way she describes a lot of social interactions, you know, living alone, having neighbors, and reminiscing on some of the things in her past, but also the little things of life, like gardens and so on. So these are actually a series of vignettes. Some of them are more poetic than others, some of them seem more like straightforward little scenes from her life, and it's very rambly, but what I did appreciate about this book is that I think her style, her unique, quaint style, ties it all together really well. It's just a cozy kind of read, but it has a little bit more darkness and depth to it in places that kind of makes you feel like you're reading something that will challenge you a little and not just fluff, right? It's an almost perfect book. I think what kind of threw me off of Pond is that there are places where she uses crude language and vulgarity, not like a lot, but just here and there. And I think that kind of jolted me out of the tone of the book, the rest of the tone of the book. So it's one of those things I could almost recommend everyone, but not quite. I think that would be rather off-putting for a lot of people, as it was to me. But by and large, I did enjoy Pond, and it definitely keeps you guessing, okay, how much of this is really happening in the narrator's life and how much of it is just kind of her random thoughts and musings. And that's kind of what made me realize the beauty of autofiction is reading Pond. I think the way that we all experience life is idiosyncratic. The way different people remember events is different, the same events. You know, if you're talking to your loved ones about a favorite vacation or something that you did together, different members of the family are going to remember different things. And I think autofiction, whereas a traditional autobiography or memoir is going to have bias in it, but it's not going to be so overt. I think autofiction leans into that narrative building that we all do when it comes to our memories and lives, and it makes it possible for the author to express reality as they experienced it and not just the bare facts and events and emotions that they had. Because in a book like these, you can really get poetic. You know, you don't even have to follow a set sequence of events. You can jump around in time, but the most important thing I think is being able to allow the impressions and the stories we tell ourselves and others to impose themselves on the story and not just try to skate around them in search for some elusive objective account. Like there's really never going to be such a thing as a fully objective memoir or autobiography. So this takes advantage of that and just leans into the fiction a little more, and I think that's really enjoyable, and I think actually gets at the more how to put it, the truths that arise out of our experience and not just what happened, if that makes sense. Probably doesn't make sense. If I'm editing this and I take that out, then there'll be an awkward gap here. But I think you'll get what I mean if you try reading one of these. This is the kind of thing I think I'd like to write someday. Now let's talk about Cold Enough for Snow. I've really had kind of an up and down experience with this one. This is an even lesser known work, also by the same publisher, and I just kind of picked it up on a whim. It's about a daughter who takes her mom on a trip to Japan. I believe, oh dear, I'm gonna really get in trouble here if I get this wrong. I want to say that the mother and daughter are They're from another East Asian country. I believe it's Hong Kong, but I could be wrong with that. So don't quote me on that. In any case, they go to Japan, and the idea is this daughter's arranged this trip to be kind of this nice bonding time with her mother. But as so often happens with family vacations, it doesn't necessarily go the way she had anticipated or planned despite her best efforts. Now, I really was excited about the premise of this book, and one of the reasons I actually bought it is because I was flipping through it and I really liked the style and the tone of the book. This is far more serious in tone than Pond. Pond has a lot of, you know, wry humor and, like I said earlier, a little bit of vulgarity. But Cold Enough for Snow is very much more serious in tone and even melancholy in places, which appeals to me a little bit more. But I will say that I was quite a bit disappointed by this book by the end of it. I think it promises a lot. I think it promises some interesting insights or commentary on parent-child relationships, especially relationships where there's some distance. I was really interested in that. And I've read other books that kind of touch upon that, or upon tricky relationships. But this book, I think she starts to ramble quite a bit as it goes on, and she starts to just reminisce about all these different memories and things. Now, the way this differs a lot from Pond is that I don't think there's anything that really connects the dots well here. I think that, you know, there's this suggestion of a frame story with the trip to Japan, and there's, you know, there's like threads, right? They're not really connected. It just felt very random after a while, and I don't think she ever dug deep enough into the conflict, or even explored it to its full extent. It felt very surface level compared to other books I've read on similar topics. So I'm not saying it's a bad book or anything, and I was certainly moved by parts of it, but I think that it just didn't quite deliver on some of the things I was expecting it to deliver on. So that's Cold Enough for Snow. I have read a couple other pieces of autofiction I don't have here. So one of them is called Panorama by a Slovenian author whose name I'm afraid I can't remember. I'm going to put a picture of it on the screen. I liked Panorama. It's actually about multiple places in Europe and multiple people telling their stories. Did like that one. And then the other book that I think comes under autofiction is A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. Didn't care for it as much, but I did write a little bit about it on my blog, so you can check that out if you're interested. Altogether, I really have been enjoying autofiction. I think it's an easy kind of book to read if you're not really feeling into fiction and you're not really feeling into nonfiction. If you're just kind of in this reading limbo, maybe you're on a reading hangover from a really great book. I feel like this is an easy place to land because, you know, it spans the gap, and it really makes you slow down a little bit, not in a bad way. I think all of these books are slow reads, but in a gentle way that just meets you where you are and doesn't ask too much of you. So that's where I'm at with the autofiction. Just a very brief introduction. Let me know if you've read any of these or if you're interested in autofiction, and I'll see you next time. Bye!